Yes, please do. Please do. I really would appreciate it. It's 30. What am I talking now? I'm talking 36 years ago. I became a member of the NUM. So I'd love to see anyone still around.
That sounds good. So you do have links to Wales then?
I do. I might have been a member of Parliament in Wales. I stood for the nomination in Rhondda, and I got more nominations than all the other candidates put together. And the supporters of all the other candidates combined to keep me off the shortlist. A good old Welsh Labour fix-it.
And who are we left with now?
Chris Bryant, yes. Less said about him, the better.
Yeah, well, you're back in Wales, and we are the only stop neath the Gwyn Hall, so we feel flattered, should we?
Well, I wouldn't say flattered. It's our privilege and pleasure to be there, but there was only room in the schedule for one stop in Wales, and I wanted it to be in the valleys because of my previous connection there. The last time I spoke in Neath was with the late and great Tony Benn, who organised a meeting on as close to the Rhondda as he could get to show his support for me. Now we're talking back in 1982.
Wow, a long time ago then.
Yeah.
Well, we're very glad you made your stop. So tell us, what can we expect from the show then? Because I know a lot of people are looking forward to it. So what have we got to look forward to?
Well, I don't know what you can expect from him. He'll tell you, but I'll be, of course, strolling a little bit down memory lane and talking about the South Wales that was and is now, and how we got there from one of the great workshops of the world to industrial dereliction and hopelessness, underemployment, low pay, poor public services, all the things that afflict Britain's post-industrial areas. But I'll be looking forward to a general election, which might come sooner than we think, talking about the impact of Brexit, what opportunities it can provide if we seize them, and looking at Jeremy Corbyn, because of course I've been standing beside Jeremy Corbyn on the streets and in Parliament for the best part of 40 years.
Yes, indeed. So it's going to be a real mixed bag by the sound of it.
Yeah, there'll be laughs as well. Steve is a very entertaining guy. The last time he appeared on stage, he was Jesus.
Yes, I was. Yes, I have a colourful history of treading the boards. The last time I was on stage, I was 16 and I played Jesus in Godspell, the musical. So I'm walking.
So it's a kind of resurrection.
Yes,
you're returning.
Yes, John the Baptist maybe this time. But yeah, so a bit of a return to form for me, as it were. But no, from myself, I think you can expect some background as to how I ended up. I'm a political journalist and broadcaster. I have a long history in my family of political activity, something I didn't really come into myself until I was in my early 30s, actually. And me and George will be, as he said, discussing Brexit, the future of the UK, more sort of geopolitics as well, what's going on in the world, and the future, where we move forward from here, because politics is an extremely polarised time at the moment. The world is in a lot of political upheaval across its four corners.
And might we mention Trump? The great orange man himself?
Yes, Trump might be mentioned, as might the May bot, as it were. We'll have some discussion.
Sorry?
Well, we're certainly looking forward to it.
So are we.
How long are you on tour for?
It'll be going on at least until the general election is called. We're making our way south at the minute, so we'll probably have some dates around the southeast, the southwest, and then finishing up in London.
Well, we'll see you back on the road again soon.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's absolutely lovely and great to talk to you.
Thank you so much. Gwyn Hall on Saturday. Be there or be square.
To do that, we definitely will. Well, we'll leave it there for now because people can come along and see your show. So you don't want to reveal any more, of course. But it's been lovely talking to you both.
And to you.
Likewise.
And see you on Saturday because I'll be there.
Oh, fantastic. We look forward to seeing you.
Looking forward to meeting you, and good luck
Don't forget the miners.
Oh yes, definitely, absolutely.
Thanks
Take
a lot.
care, both.
Thank
Have a
you.
nice day.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for that.
Very well.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah. Talk to you Saturday. Take care.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Did you hear about that plane missing?
There's a 15 million footballer on board.
Yeah.
Just signed on Saturday.
But I heard this news last night and it went just passing. I'm like, wait, a flight went over the radar, excuse me? And
Yeah.
it's just a channel, it's just, I mean, you can literally...
What's amazing is he was flying to Wales. Why do you have to be over the Channel Islands
No.
to fly to Wales? Straight
Tally
up.
routes, yeah.
Yeah, and why fly to Wales in a small plane
Yeah.
in January
No. It's very
when
confusing.
you're a 15 million quid footballer?
But it was a private plane,
Whose
right?
idea was that? Yeah, small plane, light plane. I mean, you might just prize me onto such a plane in midsummer
Yeah.
with perfect visibility.
Weather at the minute,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
But it wasn't that bad weather. It turned out to rain later, but I think by the time they left,
Well, it must be down in the sea, and he's there for dead.
I mean, that must be the assumption, right?
I hope they're insured.
Terrible.
I mean, they've never paid 15 million for a player in their history.
Really? And he's Argentinian, right? His name is Salah.
Salah, yeah.
The government have just, I'm just thinking through the Northern Ireland story.
Yeah.
Karen Brady has said, oh, it's nothing to do with Brexit. Briefly, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, as half an Irishman, I'm entitled to say I wouldn't have started from here if you asked me the way to go. The fact that Brexit throws up a constitutional conundrum or even crisis is a good thing so far as I'm concerned, because it forces the people in the north of Ireland to focus on the fact that their island should never have been divided in the first place. It ought to reunite. And if the majority of people in Northern Ireland want to remain in the EU, well, there's a very easy way to do it. Hold a border poll and vote to reunite the country. The proper border between Ireland and Britain is in the middle of the Irish Sea, and the proper border between Britain and the EU is in the middle of the Irish Sea.
Your camera's going to be here because of the light.
Yeah.
Yeah?
I don't understand why I'm not allowed to drink tea on this show. I kind of don't get it. It's an attractive Beatles cup.
Okay, it's just a lot on the plate then.
Yeah. Tonics, tea cakes can be in it, but not a teacup. Okay.
Clap. No? Clap.
I'm George Galloway.
I'm Steve Topple.
Together we are Topple Galloway here every week at this time, bringing you some left field, some zany, but definitely never boring ruminations on the issues of the day. Now, if you go down to the woods today, prepare for a big surprise. The 97-year-old Duke of Edinburgh, not wearing a seatbelt, driving a presumably bulletproof, bomb-proof, i.e. super heavy 4x4, bearing down on you. What did you make of that story?
But the way you've described it, and I'm sure what story we're talking about, Prince
is-
Philip bearing down on you, that sounds like something
It's not something the Queen experiences often
No,
over
I'm
here.
sure it's not. I think
They
how
don't
many
even
children has
breakfast.
she got?
Well, they don't breakfast together anymore.
Oh, don't
We
they?
long ago knew that they
No.
had didn't sleep together because about 40 years ago, a man appeared at her bedside,
yes, that's right.
and she sat talking to him
yes.
for quite some time.
Most action she had during the night in quite a while, obviously.
Yeah, it had been some time since there was a man in her bedchamber.
Yes,
But
indeed.
so we knew
No.
they didn't sleep together. Now we know they don't breakfast together. And clearly he's out of control.
Yeah.
Why is he driving alone in a 4x4, as I say, presumably super heavy, not even wearing his seatbelt, crashing into a family with children, nearly killing everyone in both vehicles. And the next day, he takes delivery of a replacement 4x4 and is out driving again without a seatbelt.
It's absolutely staggering, isn't it? I mean, there was a lot of... The BBC coverage of this was quite nauseating. I mean, if it had been any other man... I can give you a perfect example, actually. It's up the road from where I live.
Imagine it was Corbyn that was driving the car.
I dread to think. Actually, it would have been, the headlines would have been appalling.
Not that he even drives a car, and if he did, it wouldn't be a 4x4 Range Rover.
No,
it would be a Trabant, of course.
Corbyn in a Trabant is brilliant. Yes, back to the subject in hand. No, if it had been anyone else, because just up the road from me in South London, a young lady and her 8-month-old baby were killed a few days ago. It was not a hit and run. The driver stopped immediately. There was no indication that the driver's done anything wrong. But obviously there's been a big hoo-ha and lots of people have been asking questions about the driver, some people blaming him. And yet because it's Prince Philip, the sort of the way the Overton window works is that the onus has all been on poor Prince Philip. But somehow it's still wonderful he's driving.
Well, radio stations went into a kind of sorry to tell you this, Phil, but there is a protocol for when you eventually die, and radios have a procedure for going in basically into national mourning. And as soon as this news came through, he's 97, hanging out of his Range Rover with the vehicle on its side. You know, it was scramble for the protocol. What we're going, because presumably he's not going to survive, and it was all about him. Whilst it turns out that a woman broke her wrist, there was a 9-month-old baby in the back of her car. I mean, I want to know several things. Was His Royal Highness, is he a Royal Highness?
I think, no, it's in the Queen, isn't it? It was royal.
She's Your Majesty, she's the only...
He is HRH.
I think he is, yeah.
That's it. She's
was His Royal Highness breathalyzed? What was the result? Was His Royal Highness driving with due care and attention? Was he guilty of reckless driving? Was he wearing a seatbelt? And is His Royal Highness insured? Think about it.
I wonder if they
What's he got, a direct line?
Some meerkats popping up every year. On
Go compare!
I think that's a really interesting question, actually. But more I want to know, what was he doing out on his own? I thought that surely their security brief is...
I'm sure we're paying for the security. So where was it?
Well, I mean, was he popping off to his local Tesco Express to get a bottle of...
Or a massage, maybe? He likes a massage, allegedly.
I pity the masseuse. Why was he on his own? That's very peculiar. And then what was also fascinating was you had Nick Witchell.
Going to see a bird, a partridge, a pheasant, or a grouse.
Yes. You had Nick Witchell, the royal sycophant or correspondent as is known on BBC.
Ghastly fellow, as Charles called him.
Ghastly fellow, yes. Talking about, obviously, questions will be asked, but yet the royal family did their usual stiff upper lip and no one made a fuss and etc. Of course they don't want to make a fuss because there's now huge questions over whether he should be driving, why he was out on his own. But moreover, I think it should open up a broader debate, moreover, I think, for me, about whether people over a certain age should have regular updates with regards to their tests and their driving abilities. No disrespect to anyone of a certain age.
No, but 97's too old to be driving. And driving a powerful car on an A road. He can drive around Sandringham. It's not as if he's short of land.
No.
He can drive around his own land till his heart's content.
Yeah, of course.
I always thought he was a pony and trap fellow. Because I've seen him with the top hat and the pony and trap.
Yes.
But it turns out he likes a powerful 4x4. Now, here's an interesting point that was made to me just the other day. I can't remember now by whom. The Queen was pictured out without a seatbelt the next day, but she cannot be prosecuted. Why? Because you could not have Regina versus Regina.
Oh, yes.
You think about it, she'd have to prosecute herself.
For God's sake. I've
Put on the black cap. I have no alternative but to sentence you to the maximum sentence.
Well, George, you know my thoughts on this and the monarchy, and I have one solution to all this, which is, of course, off with their heads.
No, I'm against that. I like the Queen. I even like the Duke of Edinburgh, actually. But this ought to be the last.
It's
long life, ma'am. But after you, we really need a referendum on whether we should be a republic.
Yes.
Don't you think?
I'll take that one.
Otherwise, Charles will be driving around when he's 97, mowing peasants.
I thought he was 97.
Pheasants down.
Peasants down.
Well, he's what is he? He must be. Oh no, he's way over that. He's 70. Just had his 70th birthday.
I still think they'll jump him and go straight to William. I can't see that he'll pick up. Or he'll.
I'm not sure Camilla will allow anybody to jump him because she wants her day in the sun as the non-queen.
Yes.
Enough
Anyway,
about the royals.
Enough about this rubbish.
Nice boots, Stevie.
Oh, thanks. Yes.
It's a classic.
Well, the All-Stars.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Tenner on eBay. Lovely. Leather ones.
Leather.
No.
Yes. Can you look for me?
Those.
I'll wear them on summer holiday.
The short ones, you mean?
No, I like
Go-
No.
I was devastated. I must have about 15 pairs of Converse, the high top type. And then Theresa May was wearing fucking Converse on her summer holidays.
Was she?
Yes.
Lederhosen. She got
That's not quite low.
on a Bavarian hill walking. Apparently our man likes a bit of Lederhosen.
Yes, a long Tory tradition of that.
La vie anglais, as
Yes.
the Continentals call it.
David de Sanchez Miller. But no, yes, she's wearing Converse on her holidays.
Unbelievable.
Ruins them for me. Anyway, never mind.
Yeah, it's fine. So you see from J to the clock, and I don't think anybody can disguise who that fellow is on that plate.
That's all right, don't worry. Talking point.
Yeah.
On our Skype, the Russian hat with the Soviet star was clearly visible. The sharp-eyed South Wales communist will spot it.
I didn't realise you stood for Ramadan.
Yeah, almost.
I was completely cheated.
So bad.
Totally cheated.
That's it now.
They kept off the shortlist the guy who had more nominations than all of them put together. Incredible.
Yep. Unsurprising.
So I might have been sitting here now talking in a Welsh accent for it. Clap?
Yeah.
I have an apology to make on this week's Topple Galloway show. I do, yes. I made a fatal error in one of my other broadcasting outlets, Topple Uncaged, my podcast for the Canary. I made a fatal error 2 weeks ago, in so much that I said that I thought Fiona Bruce was doing quite a good job on BBC Question Time. How bloody wrong I was. Because after last week's episode, there has been a furore over the treatment of Diane Abbott, wasn't there, George, specifically on last week's Question Time.
Fiona Bruce might have to go over it.
Already, yeah.
Just
Two shows. This sort of storm surrounded the fact, firstly, there was audience members came forward and said that in the warm-up to the show, if you like, Fiona Bruce made some comments about Diane Abbott, not least allegedly, by the way, BBC have denied this happened, but several people came forward and said it.
Well, they can prove it by releasing the footage.
They can indeed, exactly, which I don't think they'll do. Fiona Bruce allegedly said that you can basically, they were sort of, she was instigating a pile on Diane Abbott, allegedly, saying that you can tell her what you really think of her, and implying, well, she apparently said outright that Diane Abbott only got her shadow cabinet post because of her relationship with Jeremy Corbyn, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, was allegedly what she said to the audience. Then, of course, there was a storm over the polling debate during the show where Fiona Bruce backed up
no
room
for debate on that one, Steve.
No, there isn't.
They were Oakshott and Bruce with all their smug upper class complacency were completely wrong.
Yeah.
And Diane Abbott was completely right.
Yep.
So next week's show better start with a fulsome apology to Diane Abbott for that point about the polling.
Yeah.
We'll come back, I'm sure, to what was said in the warm-up.
Yeah, because exactly. It was blatantly untrue what they said, because the Tory fibs, Dr. Clark, put out a tweet, it was rather good, showing the most recent polling. It was only YouGov or Comres who put the Tories ahead. The other 6 or 7 pollsters all had Labour ahead or equal to the Tories. And Comres...
The Tories were ahead in 1.
It was YouGov.
Out of 7.
Yeah.
And they're always ahead in YouGov.
Founded by the Tories.
We believed YouGov, founded by the Tories, owned by a Tory MP. The truth is, if you believed YouGov, Theresa May would be sitting in Parliament with a landslide majority behind her.
Yes. But for me, George, I mean, this was... I had no hopes, if you like, that Fiona Bruce was going to be a new broom at Question Time. It was all going to change, because they're merely fiddling around with the front face of it. It's not changed the production team or the...
She's the lipstick on the pig.
Yeah, essentially.
The BBC, when it privatised Question Time, gave it to some very peculiar company based in the South Wales Valleys called Mentorn.
Yeah.
Who would have thunk it? A great British institution is actually owned by a group of shadowy venture capitalists.
Yes, essentially.
And yet they command the BBC's current affairs landscape. Who agreed to that? When did we agree to that?
Yes, and that's a very important point, and it's an aspect which is often missing from the narrative about the BBC, that it farms out so much of its programming and so much of its flagship programming. But yeah, I thought maybe Fiona Bruce would be a bit of a new broom, as it were, but it's just the same old story, as it were. I mean, this is a constant debate year in, year out about the BBC. Do we think it's no longer fit for purpose? Has it? Just for the caveat, actually, within this, talking about its news and current affairs programming, because a lot of its cultural programming, a lot of its entertainment programming is very good. You can't deny that the BBC is not a brilliant broadcaster within certain aspects. News and current affairs is dire, and is it too late to resurrect it to its glory days, as it were, do you think?
Well, for me, yes, because I don't actually agree that there ever were glory days. The BBC was born as a British state propaganda outfit. That's just a fact. It was created to convey the British state's political messages in time of war, which continued in time of peace. So I don't believe there ever were halcyon days. There was definitely more classy days. When I was first on BBC Question Time, Sir Robin Day with his bow tie was in the chair. There was only 4 guests, me plus 3 real cabinet level heavyweights, and it had class, had weight, had what's the word I'm searching for? Gravitas.
Yes.
It's now the Jeremy Kyle show. Where you get these misfits picked for the audience, and sometimes misfits on the panel too. And the job of the misfits in the audience is to scream abuse, prejudice, bigotry, and be encouraged to do so by Dimbleby Latterly, and now in her second and perhaps final show, Fiona Bruce. Let me deal with the Diane Abbott story first, and with some caveats. I don't think Diane Abbott is a great television performer, but I know lots of politicians who are not great television performers, and none of them receive a scintilla of the abuse that Diane Abbott gets. Yeah. I know that she forgot her lines when she was unwell and on medication. She has a diabetes problem, and she fluffed her lines, got a couple of numbers wrong. But Philip Hammond is the Chancellor of the Exchequer, in charge of all our money, and he got the cost of HS2 wrong by £20 billion.
Yep, that was on Mar, wasn't it? I remember it well, yeah.
£20 billion, and he's looking after our cash. So why is he not abused every time he comes up for another interview? Why don't they say, of course, you're the man that miscounted the HS2 bill by £20 billion. And what she allegedly said in the warm-up, and I stress, if the BBC want to prove that this never happened, as several of the people in the audience say it did happen, then release the footage as Labour has demanded from you. If you've nothing to hide, release the footage. Until you do, I'm entitled to say this. Allegedly, Fiona Bruce said, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, Diane Abbott's place in politics is related to the place she used to occupy in bed with Jeremy Corbyn. Now, that is utter sexism, for a start, about a woman that has been in Parliament for now quite a bit over 30 years, is a Cambridge graduate, was a senior civil servant, has now elevated to one of the 3 great offices of state, and she's a black woman.
Yeah.
That is worthy of a round of applause, not that kind of smear.
Yeah.
If you were any woman being told that the only reason you've got a position is because you slept with your boss, you would have a right to say that is misogynistic, sexist drivel.
Yeah.
And no one, least of all a public broadcaster, should be saying it. But when you're a black woman on top of that, and you are the person who's in receipt of 50% of all online abuse, 50% of the politicians, she gets the abuse of half of the abuse. She gets half of the abuse that is dished out to politicians online. It is a scandal, an absolute disgrace. And look, I owe Diane Abbott nothing. I've known her for a long time. She's not a friend of mine. She's never done anything for me. I'm not speaking party pre, as it were. I'm speaking on behalf of black people, on behalf of women who have a right to have their achievements recognised without this slur that they got these achievements for the exchange of sexual favours. It doesn't get any lower than that, BBC.
No, it doesn't. And I mean, the bottom line is I'm no fan of Diane Abbott either. I don't particularly think she's a cracking politician, but that's nothing to do with anything else. I just don't agree with a lot of what she says. However, you're quite right that this would not have, if this had been any other situation than any other politician, it would have blown up more than it has. It's only really been the independent media focusing on it. But moreover, what this shows, for me, on that note, is the way that someone like Fiona Bruce, a woman who has allegedly smashed this glass ceiling at the BBC and gone up to the realms of presenter of the Antiques Roadshow and Crime Watch and main anchor on the 6 o'clock news and now Question Time, still plays into the misogyny and racism, allegedly, that exists at the BBC. She was the instigator of it, allegedly, if you believe the reports that come out of the audience. And that's more damning, the fact that it's another woman doing this.
Yeah, very good.
But overall, I think she's been very disappointing. But then, as I said at the start of the show, I have to apologise for my error of praising her. I shouldn't have expected anything less, because what they have done with Fiona Bruce is essentially dumbed down Question Time even more, and it's becoming apparent now. I mean, while she was an anchor for BBC News, she's essentially done sort of fluff television like the Antiques Roadshow, and the Question Time is now turning into an even more of a circus, if you like, with Fiona Bruce sort of trying to G up the audience and interact and crack some jokes and blah blah blah, and it's just even worse. I mean, for what it's worth, out of the candidates that were tabled last year, apart from yourself, which would have been rather nice.
I know, you've got an interview.
Shock horror. Apart from yourself, it would have been nice. Mateless probably would have been the best candidate. Emily Mateless, I think, out of the female BBC anchors, she's probably, for my money, one of the strongest ones. Don't get me wrong, I don't think she's great just because she's an establishment anchor, but she is, when you watch her on Newsnight, out of all the Newsnight presenters, Evan Davis, so on and so forth, I think she's the strongest anchor on Newsnight. She's quite often very, very sort of dog of the bone when interviewing people, and I think Maitland would have been the best person to take questions.
I was in favour of Andrew Neil getting it on the basis that he is the best interviewer of political figures, as we discussed.
Yeah, whatever you think of his politics, you can't beat him.
He's hard politics, Mateless politics, Andrew Neil's politics. Yeah. I hate all of their politics. Talking about professionalism.
Yes,
it's a must if you're doing a job like that. If you're going to be, an attack dog, you have to be equally savage with all the panels, not ganging up with an upper-class Tory toff, Oakshott, who's never off the programme, by the way. Incredible.
Yeah, it's like hard to prove.
Who is she? I mean, what does she represent? Anyway, ganging up with an upper-class Tory toff and being completely wrong about the subject you ganged up about. Egg on face.
Indeed.
I think we might need a fourth subject, though, no? Or is this 10 minutes?
I'm not sure we can get 10 minutes out of this because it's not. I think it's important that we touch on it because this is going to. I think it's going to be one of the stories of the year. Is what's. I think this is just going to kick off and and always has.
Okay, who's got? Am I leading? You leading?
I don't.
If you're ready to lead,
I'll do a short introduction.
Okay, Platt?
I can do it now. Oh.
There have been concerning developments, to say the least, in Northern Ireland, or the 6 counties, depending on how you choose to call it and where you're from. There was obviously a car bomb over the weekend, weekend being we're recording on the 22nd of January. Since then, several people have been arrested. There's also been more suspected car bombs, 3, I believe, of which actually were hoaxes, allegedly, in the end, George. They weren't what the security services
There's been a couple of vans hijacked
thought they were. Yeah, but this...
Presumably for those purposes.
Yeah, I mean, they've pointed at the new IRA as the suspects, as it were. No one's actually come out and said that they committed to the actual car bomb or the hoaxes. But, I mean, for me, there was a kind of... Look, Karen Brady, Northern Ireland Minister, has come out and said there's nothing to do with Brexit, we're not sure what it's to do with, but there's nothing to do with Brexit. But for me, there was always an inevitability with this, really, not least because the wounds, however much the establishment glosses over them, had not fully ever healed. But moreover, I think there was going to be a consequence of the Conservatives siding with the DUP as they have done in their confidence and supply agreement. But thirdly, ever since the backstop was announced, I think that was always going to be another spark which was going to reignite tensions, as it were. Now, I may be wrong. I'm not going to stand and say I'm an expert on Irish issues. I'm not, but I have a broad understanding. And like I say, this was always an inevitable consequence, which was also, when the Brexit referendum came up, always glossed over by the media as well, what the implications of leaving the EU or remaining in the EU would be for Ireland, as it were. So that's my kind of position. But you're very clued up on this, and I'd be interested to know your thoughts on what is going on in the north of Ireland.
Well, look, it was always a tinderbox, as you imply. Nothing fundamental was resolved in the peace agreement. There were some gains, some advances, of course, but nothing fundamental was changed. The fundamental fact is that the small island of Ireland was torn asunder by the British state almost 100 years ago, in collusion with, then as now, the Protestant ascendancy, the loyalist, unionist rump of Ireland. The 6 counties, that's all we're talking about. It's not a country, it's not an island, it's just 6 counties in a 32-county Ireland, remains torn from its motherland and held by that collusion, in the 2 hands of that collusion. The British state's former, at least, selfish interest in retaining a part of Ireland, and the loyalist populations wish to cling to the Union Jack apron. So that wasn't resolved, and of course, therefore, that tension will always exist. But I'll tell you another tension that isn't noticed. The Good Friday Agreement and all these decades of peace now that have followed, relative peace, didn't change the lives of the poorest people, Catholic and Protestant, in the 6 counties. In fact, many of them live really difficult, hard lives. And whilst a political class on either side of the conflict inevitably rose to political office and salaries and even chauffeur-driven cars in some cases, at least until the Assembly was suspended, down below, amongst the rank and file and now their children, nothing much changed. Yeah. They live in the same house, they have the same low-paid employment, they enjoy, if that's the word, the same poor public services, the pressures on the health service and so on in the north of Ireland, really very severe. So you've got, added to the tinder, or the national question, you have economic questions. And all these ersatz IRAs, continuity IRA, real IRA, and now new IRA, insofar as I know anything about them, I feel sure that they'll be drawing their support, such as it is, from the disinherited, the disenfranchised, the marginalised, the poor, for whom life hasn't changed under the Good Friday Agreement. But you know, being half an Irishman, I'm entitled to say, as the Irishman apocryphally did when approached by a stranger and asked the direction to Dublin, he answered, "Oh, I wouldn't have started from here. I wouldn't have started from here." And if it's true that the clear majority of people in the 6 counties want to remain in the EU, there's a very, very simple way of doing it. And that is to use the Good Friday Agreement, which provides for border polling, have a referendum on whether Ireland should be reunited inside the EU or not. In a way, it's decision time for the unionist population. They have to decide whether they're more loyal to the European Union or to the British Crown, which, by the way, doesn't give a toss about them, would be ready, as the backstop proves, ready to throw them to the wolves if it had suited them and if Parliament had let them get away with it. So I strongly advise people from the unionist tradition to take this opportunity, England's difficulty, Ireland's opportunity, take this opportunity to reunite a country that should never have been divided in the first place.
No, I don't disagree. And while, like as I said in the introduction, I'm not going to claim to be really genned up on the Irish question, as it were. I have a basic understanding, but my position is the same as yours. I agree with reunification, but I mean, the Northern Irish Assembly, it's been nearly 2 years now.
2 years suspended.
It's been suspended.
They're on half pay.
So, I mean, 2 points on that really. Firstly, would a border referendum, if you like, even be possible anyway? And secondly, do you think the suspension of the Assembly has also had an impact on the increasing activity of the new IRA? Do you think that's playing into
possibly, yeah. I mean, you have a vacuum. There's no first minister.
Because there's a political sort of, there's a no man's land. Essentially.
I mean,
2 weeks. We talk about the US government being shut down.
Exactly. This has been shut down for 2 years, and yet Arlene Foster is continually described as the Chief Minister, First Minister of Northern Ireland, as they call it. In fact, she isn't. She's a half-time member of the Assembly. That's the only position that she holds. I suppose she's the leader of the DUP. But I mean, in a vacuum, all kinds of things will happen. The devil finds work for idle hands. There's a lot of idle hands in Ireland. Taking up weapons again is not something that Sinn Féin or the IRA would do in these circumstances, but some of the younger, more alienated forces are clearly ready to do that. And we'll have to be very careful, because that car bomb, it didn't hurt anyone, but it could easily have done, and we saw from the horrific crime at Omagh just how much damage a car bomb can do. It can make little mincemeat out of scores of human beings. And we mustn't see a return to that. So I very much hope that the hard-won peace can be saved, but I think the politicians ought to get on with it. I think the Irish need to get on with it. I think the Irish government needs to get on with it. Sinn Féin, which is the biggest party now in Ireland, if you put North and South together, they need to get on with it. I don't see why it's always me that's agitating for a border poll and not them.
That's a very good point, but I can probably very easily answer that. No, I don't. I think it's going to. I think this is a story or a situation rather that is going to.
How do you see Brexit now, Steve?
How do I see it?
Yeah, is it going ahead or not?
I don't know. All I see is that apparently now the Oxford English Dictionary is being rewritten, so A has the same meaning as B, because Theresa May came back with her plan B, and it was basically, apart from the old 65 quid here and there for EU nationals registering, it's basically the same as plan A. So how do I see it? My position hasn't changed from what we said on last week's show. There's two options out of this mess, which essentially, one, the Tory party push her out. I mean, we had a story broken by the iPaper today, Tuesday, 22nd of January, that cabinet ministers are already planning mass resignations next week in response to the fact that A means B in Theresa May's world, and that there's no concessions being made. There's already chatter of that. She's still as robotic and
she's still acting like nothing
happened. It's just like onwards and upwards.
Nothing's changed.
No. Yes, as last week, carry on at your convenience. And my position hasn't changed. I cannot see any other way out of this. But they boot her out because and that annoyed me. Joining two topics together, actually, on Question Time last week, because they spoke of the should Article 50 be extended, blah blah blah, and every panelist trotted out the same answer saying, well, yes, basically yes, the government should extend Article 50, or no, the government shouldn't extend Article 50. Of course, what none of them said was, we can't extend Article 50. What we have to do to extend Article 50 is go to the Council of Europe, ask their permission, the Council of Europe has to vote as to whether they're going to let us extend Article 50, then we can do it. And if they seriously think that with Theresa May at the helm, the 28 member states of Europe are going to vote for Theresa May to extend Article 50.
When they see her coming again.
I almost, I hear Benny Hill music in my head. I have or someone with a tuba behind her.
Well, in my RT column today, I have floated a third possibility.
Oh, go on.
And the third possibility is the least likely, but it solves the problem for the British ruling class of Brexit. It means
off with their heads.
It means they can stay in the European Union. Here's how it works. Just like MacDonald in 1931 abandoned his own party and formed a national government with the Tories, a national government comes to power in the current House of Commons. 200 Conservative MPs who really want to remain in the European Union, 100 Labour MPs who hate Corbyn and really want to remain in the European Union, form themselves into a coalition. That's 300. That's the biggest party in the House by a long chalk. When you add 11 Liberals, 27 Scottish nationalists, 4 Welsh nationalists, 1 Green, 8 independents, and you could add all of them, you get a commanding majority to remain in the EU inside the current House of Commons. But it could only come to pass if they were recognised as the government. And that would require the collusion of the Speaker and of the Queen, neither of which, if you think about it, is an insurmountable object, because who wants to remain in the EU? Well, only the richest, the most powerful, the biggest banks, corporations, British capitalism, the British deep state, Whitehall, the BBC, all of them want to remain in the European Union. And they have a majority in the House of Commons today without an election. If they could only find a way of putting it in power. Read my piece. You might be surprised.
I will. Well, you know, you've said all that now, and it doesn't actually now seem too far-fetched, because you must have seen the pictures on Monday of Chukwuemeka, Luciana Berger, Anna Soubry, Sarah Wollaston, all the usual centrist suspects from both Labour and the Tories coming out of that meeting they had with Theresa May. I mean, if I was to be mistaken, but I would have thought that those wheels are in motion already. Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, I can't say.
Well, I've heard the wheels, but I've just imagined for myself what if I was in there. That's the kind of wheel I'd be looking out for.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Time will tell, and we may know more next week.
And time has told, because that's all we've got time for.
That is it for this week. Yes, and look, we only managed about 5 minutes on Brexit. Hey!
So, Neath on Saturday night, and on Sunday night at the Old Rep Theatre in Birmingham. Me and Ken Livingston, the Outsiders. See you next week.
Take care.
Oh, you couldn't get it. You wanted the fourth topic.
Yeah. That was a good show.
Good.
Yeah, I'd like to do. I think we should. Well, I'd like to do more of these segments where I don't have a good knowledge and I question you, because I think it's quite. I think it's quite interesting for the viewer to get.
Yeah.